So as we wait patiently for a jury's decision on young Kyle Rittenhouse's fate, let's take a minute to shine a light on one of the most ridiculous, and for sure, the most racist political figures ever allowed on television. In a House of Representatives full of radical imbeciles lacking any serious intellectual capacity, Cori Bush manages to tower above the rest in sheer low IQ race-baiting arrogance. That's no easy feat given the stiff competition apparent in the Democrat Party. The self-evident communist has exposed herself with one irrational rant after another since taking office. There was the time she trashed a police officer for shooting a girl who was in the process of stabbing another girl. And who can forget the time she defended defunding the police by citing all the security she has to have for herself. Or the time she promoted a scam artist on CNN while demanding an unconstitutional eviction moratorium. I can go on, but you get the idea. Oh, and once again, let me take the opportunity to thank St. Louis, Missouri for sending their best. Now, before we dive into her Rittenhouse trial racial grandstanding, let's take a quick commercial break to pay some bills. Friends, I'm going to point out the obvious. It seems like big government and big tech are trying to destroy America. Everything they touch turns into a disaster. Pretty soon the whole system will fall apart, and the first thing to fall will be the food supply chain. So, do you have enough emergency food to get through a serious long-term crisis where you can't get food at the grocery store? Most people don't, and they'll panic when the time comes. That is why the smart move now is to get long-term storage emergency food before things go bad. I highly recommend My Patriot Supply. They've served millions of American families and have over 41,000 4-star and 5-star reviews. Their mission is your survival, and right now you can save 25% on a 4-week kit of emergency food that will save the day, probably soon. Order a starter kit for each member of your family and they'll ship everything quickly and discreetly to your door. Go to preparewithresurgence.com so you can claim your 4-week emergency food kit and save 25% in the process. That's preparewithresurgence.com or hit that link in the description box. Okay, so one thing you'll also notice with someone like Cori Bush, you can always count on her one-upping her own insanity. Lately, this has become common practice with desperate people trying to stay relevant. We see this with a lot of politicians these days like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Maxine Waters, and Pocahontas, to name a few. That, of course, happened yesterday when the ugly Klansman from St. Louis delivered yet another ridiculous rant about Kyle Rittenhouse, the teen currently on trial for defending himself against leftist thugs during the Kenosha riots. So, without further ado, I present to you things that absolutely did not happen by Cori Bush, the Klansman, dare I say, the Democrats' 2021 version of a grand cyclops. She tweeted out, "When we marched in Ferguson, white supremacists would hide behind a hill near where Michael Brown Jr. was murdered and shot at us. They never faced consequences. If Kyle Rittenhouse gets acquitted, it tells them that even 7 years later, they still can get away with it." Now, let's ignore for a second how ludicrous this story is. And trust me, we'll get there. Even if this were true, what in the hell does this have to do with Kyle Rittenhouse shooting 3 white guys in self-defense in Wisconsin? So I guess part of this heathen's initial tale of woe is me to further manipulate voters included her living in her car for some time. So basically homeless. And I actually believe that to be true, because she really does remind me of a homeless person shouting incoherent nonsense at random walkers by. Anyways, so there is video evidence showing he was threatened, chased, and attacked before firing. Yet Bush, this modern-day Democrat Klansman, is so bloodthirsty that she'd see an innocent man thrown in prison for life to make her feel better about an incident that she made up. Just think about how disgusting and depraved that is. So on the merits, there is no evidence that what she says occurred, though one person on social media claimed to have proof it did via the Washington Post. Let's examine that, shall we? So adding to the Klansman's farcical nonsense on Twitter, People Over Property, or @Communist E-Girl, posted, "For the people," saying it never happened, and left a link. So as with pretty much everything lately, a closer examination of the before-mentioned article shows that 1. The incident did not happen in Ferguson, 2. Did not involve white supremacists, and 3. That the men involved were actually arrested. And just to put the racial cherry on top, if you will, one of the men who was arrested was Hispanic. In other words, none of the details fit Bush's story about roving, unpunished white supremacists taking shots at her during the Ferguson riots. And once again, nor would that have any relation to what Kyle Rittenhouse did, regardless. But let's move on. And can we just note real quick that Michael Brown was definitely not murdered, but I digress. Falsehoods or outright lies are to be expected when dealing with anything, the racial fearmonger Bush says. After it's all said and done, what strikes me the most about Bush's claims is how dangerous it is. It is an open invitation for people to riot and target not only Rittenhouse but the judge involved. She is not even entertaining the idea that he could be found legitimately not guilty, despite the reality that the facts are in his favor. Instead, she's whipping up resentment and framing this as a racial issue when it is so clearly not. That's absolutely disgusting and pathological. Bush is not fit to hold public office, and that's pretty obvious. That's been clear for a long time. And if the Democrat leadership had any semblance of a backbone, they would reprimand her for this dangerous idiocy. But if she serves a higher purpose, like bringing in a red wave in the midterms and a fresh set of 4 years for the Donald, well, I guess it is what it is then.
So the next time BLM sweeps into your town, your neighborhood, your house, to burn and loot and brandish weapons, you had better not try to protect yourself or your family. Try to protect yourself or your family, and we will charge you with murder. And while we're at it, we'll have the national media call you racist.
In the court of public opinion, they're really arguing that white men, especially white men with a gun, are allowed and have the space to defend and protect a country and a social order that keeps them at the top, and a country that they stole from indigenous folks and built with black people's labor. The media is participating and perpetuating this charade because, as far as I can tell, the only reason why any of this is allowed is because of the whiteness of it all.
So who emptied the gender studies department and put them all on television all at once? How destructive is this to the country? Seriously, putting crap like that on television. If you're wondering, can they racialize anything? The answer is yes, they can. In this case, there is, to restate the obvious, no racial angle to the story. And if you're looking for proof, consider the fact that everybody involved in the story is the same color. And in fact, in point of fact, the only bigot on the scene appears to have been Joseph Rosenbaum, the child rapist. For some reason, and it's on video, don't take our word for it, Rosenbaum kept screaming the N-word. Huh? And yet it's Kyle Rittenhouse who Joe Biden accused of being a white supremacist on the basis of no evidence whatsoever. And let's hope at some point he gets sued for that. Now they're calling the judge the same thing too. Watch.
Let's hope for 1 o'clock. I don't know. Hope the Asian food isn't coming. Isn't on one of those boats in Long Beach Harbor.
Yes, that was the judge making an off-color joke about Asian food during a murder trial. I want to ask you, how unusual is the judge's conduct currently?
Well, I think some of the things were way out of line. You know, the comment about the Asian food, for example.
Oh, yeah, that's racist. But really, it's only racist if you're exercising your right to self-defense or if you're trying to conduct a fair trial, if you don't inject equity into the trial and judge people on the basis of their skin color rather than what they actually did. If you dare to do that in this post-equity country, this post-BLM nation, you are by definition a racist. So they won't admit to the public that they lied to all of us for more than a year, so this is all they have left. You're a racist. MSNBC is by far the worst offender. It's shocking, actually, when you look at it carefully. But it's not the only offender. They're all doing this. CNN's so-called race and equity team. Can you even imagine what those people are like? In any case, they just published a piece entitled, and we're not making this up, quote, "Judge in Kyle Rittenhouse trial makes inappropriate Asian food joke." Inappropriate being the favored word of people who want to slur someone, who want to attack someone's reputation without explaining exactly why. Inappropriate, what does that mean? It's entirely subjective. But according to the piece, as it gets more specific, the judge's joke about supply chains and food puts Asians, quote, in the crosshairs of microaggression as well as actual physical violence. So when you make a joke about Chinese takeout, which, by the way, if you were a bigot, you probably wouldn't be eating in the first place. But if you dare to make that joke, you're dangerous.
And on that note, it's on to the next one. Some of this came by way of redstate.com. If you liked it, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment down below. There's a PayPal link in the description box, so please put $1 in the bucket on the way out the door. I'd like to thank everyone for all your donations. They're much needed and much appreciated. Now, with all that being said, we'll see you next time.
Come on, move. Move. Easy, easy.